Hello, hello, you beautiful stars. Hello, hello. I am Courtney, host of Stars of the Morning Light. I have been struggling with my voice leaving in and out, all that jazzy stuff. So tonight is Edgar Cayce bio. Um, I'll probably just do two or three simple little stories. I see that Lucky Stone 888 is in the house. Thank you, Lucky. And Jackie J, good to see you, my dear. Do know that Lucky and I will be here Friday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We are going to be talking about the inner voice. I will tell you, my inner voice has been very active, massively active compared to my regular voice. There's been a lot going on internally. So I hope everyone is well. I hope everybody's holiday was good. Um, I might have to pause a little bit. I will do the best that I can. I'm happy I have a good mic. Um, I almost didn't even make it because I was questioning how well I could do this tonight, but I don't like being away from you guys. I really enjoy being with you. So I'm here. We're going to do the best that we can do, right? You do what you can, when you can, and you leave the rest to the universe, right? So, happy Wednesday. It's good to be here. So, you guys know, if you're new here, welcome. Great community here at Stars of the Morning Light. There is a huge playlist of all of this Edgar Cayce material. We either are in one video talking about his bio, in like slow chunks, retelling a lot of his bio in story form, or we're in one of his resource materials. So there is a playlist. Go check it out. Subscribe. Hit that like button for me right now. Thanks, y'all. So, if you guys can remember, we were talking in the last bio, which was a very long time ago. We have not been in Edgar's bio in probably like 6 or 7 weeks. It's been quite a long time since we were in discussing his bio. So we were talking when we left it off was that he started having kind of a series of injuries or mishaps, and we're kind of still in that pocket because bigger stuff happened, and I saved that bigger stuff, probably knowing that I was going to be too tired or drained to do a full show. So that's what we're talking tonight is like kind of this end cap of really unfortunate events. And, we talk often about how Edgar would lose his voice. Or he could sleep for 3 or 4 days and not wake up, right? This, it is common, everyone, except it seems uncommon to those. Well, now everybody here would know that they've witnessed me go through this at least twice, two big losing of the voice, and then maybe little snippets here and there of like, oh, kind of losing it or missing days because I was sleeping or whatever it may be. There are aspects to being a person that can connect to the Akashic. Tonight, the mishaps are from outside influences. No, very much so. Outside influences, other humans. But some of the stuff, I will, because I'm going to end with a little bit of it, is also from Edgar. He sincerely thought, after all these mishaps have happened, physical harms, hurts, financial harms, hurts, all this stuff would go on. He came to understand, and we're going to return to this next time as well. he came to understand that if he is not living according to his own values, his own morals, his own faith, his own belief structure, and listening to the Akashic or his guides, there is some kind of penalty, let's say. And Edgar even said that he believed that when he lost his voice for a very long time period, I mean months, he couldn't speak. He came to believe later in life that that was because he did not listen to the guardian angel who appeared to him in his youth, in a dream and elsewhere. That he didn't follow their directives, as in how to use the gift. And so he felt that that pocket of time of losing his voice was derived from that. That it was kind of like a penalty of like, hey, we gave you this gift. We told you how to use it to be in balance and harmony and peace with the laws of the universe, the laws of the cosmos. We told you what it was there for. You didn't use it correctly. So now we're going to take it away for a while. And I will tell you when there's some kind of physical that happens that is not from outside influences, as we're going to learn tonight, the mind will start doing that. And in Edgar and in my case, it is often true. If we're not using our talents and skills in the appropriate mission that those skills have, or if we are neglecting them, which is my case, I tend to neglect things because I'll focus so much on other people's stuff or doing this or doing that and not doing what is directed to me to do. Um, there might be a penalty, right? I don't call those lessons. I'm not learning anything, folks. I've gone through describing how lessons are not really an accurate term because I'm not learning anything. I know what I should be doing, but I'm choosing differently. It's all choice, right? And then if I continue to choose differently and run myself into the ground for no apparent reason, not using my skills, talents, and gifts, well, then there's going to be some kind of repercussion, right? That's just the laws of the cosmos. That's just the laws of the universe, how it works. With readers, Akashic readers, it is going to be something like what sustains our gift, which is our voice, right? So, fascinating little bit of a little tidbit there leading into the difference between our own decisions and choices and the cause and effect that they will create, even if it's coming from the universe saying, hey, we gave you such an amazing skill. Why are you not using it? Or from outside influences that cause repercussions and cause an effect in one's life. So, good to see everyone. I hope everyone's doing good. So, in the last episode of his bio, there were multiple um, illnesses, right? To the point that one of them, if we can recall, he got poisoned. Edgar Cayce was poisoned by stuff, and then when the doctors came, uh, they kept feeding him things that were inaccurate to curing what the problem was because they didn't know what it was. And Edgar is damn near on death's bed, And finally, Dr. Blackburn showed up, put Edgar in a trance, found out from the Akashic through Edgar what was going on with Edgar's body. And the Akashic was like, oh my goodness. It started with this, but now because of these crazy doctors, it's going to take even longer to cure because you got to get all those toxins out of his body. And he also burned himself through all of this. Oh my goodness. Because he kind of fainted near a fire. So poor Edgar, he was a wreck. He was a wreck. He was working too hard, got a little bit of poison in him, and it totally turned into something bigger than it needed to be. At that time, his wife Gertrude was, well, she was being a wife. It's sometimes hard to be a wife. I'm speaking because I am one, so I'm sure all the wives out there might be able to relate to this. When you see your husband working, his knuckles, down to nothing, working to the bone, and you can see what it's doing to him, and you can mention some stuff like, "Hey, why don't you rest? Why don't you pull back? Why don't you do this?" But then they don't because especially in 19 this was 19 what, 1906? Somewhere in there? 1907, 1906? The man was the provider. So even though Gertrude was not in favor of him working with the committee and all the experiments, right? Quote unquote. You can go back into the playlist and learn all about how this committee of different gentlemen, some doctors, a dentist, a lawyer, all these different gentlemen that would run these experiments while Cayce was under a trance to get information from the Akashic. She wasn't in favor of that. She wasn't in favor of him working the tons of hours, not just in photography, but also helping out the shops and doing readings for people. Not in favor of the lack of balance. Not at all. And the time that we're about to head into, because this was kind of like boom, 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 hurt and sick, boom, hurt and sick, boom, mishap, unfortunate event, boom, boom, boom. In the midst of this, Gertrude got pregnant. So it is hard to watch your husband kind of wither away and get sick and all these mishaps and hurts and unfortunate events. But what do? You can say something. You can say, I don't like this committee. But what do? Especially ladies at the turn of the 19th century. I mean, it's hard to even say it to today in today's world when you see it, right? So that's where we're at. Gertrude's not real happy. Edgar just keeps getting mistreated and abused. And the story I'm about to tell kind of terrifies me. To tell you the truth, it terrifies me. Um, and thank goodness that at least this part is what stopped the committee. Do you remember through this, Gertrude got pregnant? So, this lovely committee, run by Dr. Blackburn, decided that they were going to host a very large event to showcase Edgar's talents. They recruited and called in doctors, lawyers, all sorts of professional men. Mostly doctors, though, because remember, he was known more so at this time for his medical readings. And I mean, these guys are coming in to Bowling Green, Kentucky, from New York, Massachusetts, Chicago, all over the place. They are coming to Kentucky to see this event. It was big. It was big. It'd be like seeing David Copperfield in our generations, right? Well, I guess Gen X. I don't know who's big of today. It was a big thing. Dr. Blackburn is on stage. He does not mention anything as to who Cayce really is, what he can do. He wanted it to be a live show impression of what is happening. So he introduces himself. He introduces Edgar, but only to walk this man across the stage, set him on a chair, and then put him in a trance. So all of these bystanders are watching. Edgar's in a chair. He goes into a very deep trance, right? Hypno type of trance to connect with the Akashic. Well, they had a few people backstage that had some kind of illness to them. Edgar was asked about these individuals. The first man, it gets a little tricky here because the first man that they gave the name to Edgar, there was no response. Edgar basically was able to say via the Akashic, there's nothing we can say about this man. Well, they would have said entity. They said, there's nothing we can say about this entity at this time. Now, that was their first reading. So, of course, Dr. Blackburn was like, what the heck? I called in everybody. Well, then it was maybe suspected because the man was African American. He was a black man. That maybe Edgar wouldn't do the reading because he was racist. Not the case. What the case was, and it was proven later. Unfortunately, that man, the illness that he had was incurable. So the Akashic was saying, we don't have any information for this man right now because unfortunately he's going to die. But they didn't, the Akashic would know, don't say that, as that man is standing behind stage and you're in front of a bunch of people. Just say you can't give any information, right? The Akashic would have done that appropriately. So there was a little bit of chatter. What's going on? So Dr. Blackburn moved to the second person, another man who had, I think, some kind of, I can't remember exactly. It might have been TB, honestly. It was something like that. Edgar gave proper diagnosis, gave proper information, all of it. Well, then some guy in the audience was like, this is a hoax. Those guys are backstage, so therefore information was just traded. This is ridiculous. So Dr. Blackburn then realized, okay, there is a medical college, so kind of part hospital, just right up the road. Right up the road. I'm going to ask Edgar, who's a patient there? What is their illness and what is their cure? Edgar gave it. He's whoever the patient was, he gave their name. He gave that they were suffering from thyroid fever, I think, some kind of fever. This was how to cure it. It had to do with diet and all this stuff. The doctors were he flat out said via the Akasha, because he's in a deep trance, He said the doctors are not treating this correctly, they're actually making it worse. You know how often that came out of Edgar's mouth? So praise goodness for his gift. He's teaching the world, right? So, 2 guys, actually one of them that raised their hand like, "Yeah, this is hoax." They left and went up to that hospital, found the patient, found the information, talked to the doctors, and then came back to the show. And there is enough time frame because a lot of other stuff happened in the mix be- between the time that those guys left and came back to prove that Edgar was correct. Because they did that, because one of those guys, hey, this is a hoax. A lot of the doctors in the room, in the audience, went, yeah, he can't, he's awake. He's not in a trance, he's awake. Before Blackburn could even say anything, these doctors are now rushing the stage. So those 2 guys left to go see if it was true at the medical hospital or the medical college. Doctors started to rush the stage. I think because Blackburn probably never suspected what they would start doing is why he didn't really pull back. And then I think it became more of like a mob kind of mentality, kind of a, you know, uh, who's the biggest guy in the room, like that kind of mentality that's calling the shots. They started Edgar was clearly in a very deep trance. This is vastly before Edgar Cayce learned that he had authority with his gift, that he had some control within his gift, that he had skills to understand his gift, that he didn't have to go into a full huge trance. But at this time he was. And these doctors, the first doctor took a surgical needle apparently out of his pocket or maybe out of his bag, right? These are all doctors. Probably a very huge needle because back then, this is what, 19, I think this is 1906. 1906. So the needles would have been very large, very painful, not the needles of today. I remember those needles. Oh my goodness, are they scary? They're so scary. Like glass and metal as this for the syringe part, and then this huge needle. Oh my goodness. Oh, so, and I'll pause here for a minute and say, welcome in, Shelly. Good to see you. And the reason I know what those really look like and how heavy they were is my grandmother was severely diabetic, and she was still using one of those to give herself her shots. And it would actually sit um, on the back of the toilet. Yeah, great place for something that you're going to jab into your body, right? It was because she would do it in the morning. Oh man, what we grow up with, right? So I remember if I used that bathroom growing up, it was like, what the hell is that contraption there? I can't even imagine what they were sticking into Edgar. They took this needle and first stuck it into his arm. He didn't wake up. So then they were like, "Oh, stick it in further." They stuck it in further. He didn't wake up. They took that needle and then they stuck it and drove it through his foot. Didn't wake up. Then another doctor decided to take out a pocket knife. What? Take out a pocket knife and from under his nail on one of his hands, start to dig the nail off from the flesh with a pocket knife. Edgar did not wake up. They also then stuck him in a cheek on his face. He did not wake up. He was in that much of a trance. And Blackburn, I think it was by the time, I want to say that it went arm, deeper in the arm, foot, cheek, then the nail. And by the time they removed an entire nail, which that finger never repaired, that's when Blackburn stepped in and was like, whoa, 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 whoa. What is going on? Like, you can't just start prodding at this guy. I mean, by the time people are ripping off your nails, that's more, that's very sadistic. That's very, it doesn't matter if you don't understand that he's not going to wake up. And Edgar was quoted later in life when they were talking to him about all this, because he still had the scar on his foot from when they jammed the needle in his foot. Like I said, his finger never repaired. um Edgar, in his memoir, when reporting and talking about this incident, he was quoted saying, "In their enthusiasm and curiosity, the doctors had forgotten that I was someone like themselves." Meaning those doctors forgot that he was human as well, because he wasn't waking up. By the time Blackburn was like, whoa, 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 everybody, because Blackburn then acknowledged, well, how far is this going to go? Like, he knows Edgar as a human who walks around and works in photography and has a wife and has a life. As he's like calming these men back down, getting them kind of settled, explaining to them what is going on with Edgar, that's when those two other guys came in and said, hey, he was right. So and so up at the hospital, he was right about every single thing. Well, then it wasn't so much of a curiosity of him not waking up. Then the questions actually did start. So they all started asking questions about patients back home, patients here, patients there. Edgar was in a trance the whole time until in front of these men, Blackburn suggested, right? Because a lot of this is always reference to suggest. Blackburn brought him out, suggested that he wake up. When Edgar came came back, a horrible groaning sound came out of him because all he could feel was the pain. Oh, I'm sorry, and I missed a very, very important note to this. As they're poking him, needles in, needles out, removing fingernails, no blood ever dripped, never showed itself, never, no blood, which can happen. We know this now. Science has proven that when you're in such a hypnotic state, and that your whole system slows down. So Edgar is woken up. This horrible groan, growl, kind of pain out of, I can't even make the sound probably that he made. Could you imagine coming back oh, and I'm going to talk about what it's like to come back. Oh, but not just come back to all these men standing around you, but for your cheek to start bleeding, dripping onto the table, dripping onto your hand, your arm to be bleeding, your fingernail is gone and bleeding, gushing blood now, your foot. They, being doctors, did bandage Edgar up and cleaned him up. Good. It took Edgar quite a long time to heal from that. Emotionally, mentally, physically. He stopped associating himself with the committee and Dr. Blackburn. They were cordial to each other if they saw each other on the street, if maybe something was needed in passing, but no. It ended. Gertrude. She was pregnant when her husband came home and had been tortured by these guys. Before she could even really express anything. Because what do you do? You've been saying it for years, right, Gertrude? She's been saying it for years. Don't let them do this. And then there's your husband, who's not walking right, his arm's in pain, his cheek is bleeding, and he's missing a finger. Before she could even have the words to express, Edgar opened the door of communication, saying he was no longer going to allow experiments to happen, no longer associate with Dr. Blackburn. Gertrude was very grateful, but also she did express she never thought it should have had to come to that, which it shouldn't have. They, those doctors, as Edgar had stated later in life with his memoir, because of their fascination and their curiosity, they forgot that they were with a human. So unfortunate, right? So unfortunate. So you guys know, when I am not in a very deep hypnotic state, I can if I need to. I started training myself at a very young age to do that. Very, very young age. I was taught meditation when I was 8, and then I was learning, geez, shortly after that, I was learning how your system can slowly, you can slow your breathing, you can slow your heart rate, you can slow your entire, system of this body of form in a hypnotic, very deep trance-like state. So I started practicing towards that. Regardless of that, though, I don't do that for readings. And Edgar didn't much later in life either. I do think that is part of the reason why I can access the Akashic, though. Because I spent I mean, to the degree of where I took meditation, child, teenager, young adult, um, yeah, I I mean, I remember when I was 16, I chose I chose at 16 to be in a meditative trance-like state for 16 or 12 hours. Sorry, not 16. I think it was 12 hours. I did have to go to the bathroom once when I kind of first was getting into it. Um, but that was a choice that a 16-year-old made. That's how much I loved meditation when I was young. And I didn't take any drugs to do it, folks. I don't need them. Um, I'm trying to emphasize that I think Edgar naturally has that kind of ability, but he was not aware that it was just a natural ability of his. He thought that he needed Blackburn. He thought he needed all of these men who came around him. And we're going to understand in the next bio episode that his dad had to step in, which he should never let Leslie put him under, right? He did not know that he could do it himself until much later. And I wish he did, because the people around him, other than his wife and her family and a few members of his, they will always have their own agenda. They will always have their own agenda. And that's what they needed to be needed by him. So no one ever bothered to ask when Edgar was under, "Hey, can Edgar do this by himself?" Did they ever ask that? No, because they needed to be there. They needed to fill their curiosity. When Edgar and myself, let's say, come back, quote unquote, I do leave. I do leave. Edgar clearly leaves. We're able to put our body into a state that the body can sustain itself, but consciousness flows. When consciousness comes back, depending on the state of the body, determines if that is a rough landing or not. So when Edgar came back after all that torture, I I'm telling y'all right now, I can't imagine what it was like to come back to that. It is already hard to come back to the 3D density. It is very difficult. It sucks. It is hard. And it's that hard landing that really makes it hard on the body, because the body is in 3D. We can work on this body and help it evolve, especially now with energies that are presented in today's world, not in 1906, into in today's world. We can work with our body much, much smoother, much better. DNA is activating. We are becoming more crystalline beings. It's lovely. Not in 1906, though. So coming back to this body of form can be very harsh depending on the surroundings, depending on what's going on with that body. If that body is sick, if that body is tired, if that body is possibly crabby for whatever reason, whatever is going on in that body, when you come back, it's like, oh, God. This body. It's difficult. It's hard on the body. Hence why readers, Akashic messengers, I don't even want to call them readers anymore. Like, that's not a term that I would use. It's not really a term that the Akashic uses with me. So I guess I'm going to throw it out. I was trying to play with society, but can't do it. I refer to myself as an Akashic messenger. I don't even say Akashic records. I don't know why the records part is there. It really bothers me. So, anyways, that's my little, I guess, pet peeve. um, all these like physical ailments aspects, I do think happened to Edgar not just because of outside influences, but because he didn't know what was really going on. So bless and thank Edgar Cayce for going through all of this pain, unfortunate pain, because then he led the way for others to understand that we do have the authority. It is our gift. We can learn how to use it in our own way, our own right. We can know what our limits are, what our boundaries are, especially if our bodies are not working accordingly, right? So bless Edgar for that. Truly bless him for that. Because he was able to not just help the medical professionals. I don't know if people really can wrap their head around how many readings Edgar would give to these doctors during the spiritualist movement of the turn of the 19th century that actually would listen and go, okay, well, let's change up the diet. Let's give them this medication. Let's do this. Let's do that. And come to find out that was the cure. Edgar did so much for the medical community, which 100 years later, in turn, helps us. Dr. Benjamin Goins of IMedu Foundation, he contributes Edgar Cayce, introducing him to iodine. And we all know how great that is for us. He also, though, paved the way for all of you beautiful psychics out there. All of you beautiful psychics. That you could learn how to have great character even when it's challenged. You can learn to honor yourself, your principles, your morals, all of it, your faith. He never stopped being Christian. Even when he learned lots of parts of that Bible there are not accurate. There is such a thing as reincarnation, which is the other source book that we're working out of currently. He paved the road for those who are gifted to be comfortable with who they are. That they didn't have to dress a certain way, be a certain way, have a certain faith, not have a certain faith. They could just be the person that they're supposed to be. So I got to give the man so many props. Unfortunately, Gertrude is pregnant at that time. When he comes home, he's all beat up and battered from being around a bunch of professionals, apparently. He cuts it off with Blackburn. He focuses on his photography. 3 days before Christmas. 3 days before Christmas that year. His photo studio. Now, he was working out of two, but he owned one big time. The other one was like kind of It was an offshoot of a different store. But his big photo studio burned down 3 days before Christmas. And it was pretty much determined that I was an arson. Not by him. So the man just gets beat up and battered, loses a fingernail that never comes back 3 days before Christmas. 3 days. His how he makes his living. The man who won awards for his photography loses his livelihood. And this is why. I'm going to read a little bit of this if I can get my voice up and going. Neither Edgar, Gertrude, or John Blackburn revealed the name of the suspected arsonist, but there's an ample evidence to suggest that the likely candidate was a member of Dr. David Osmos' Night Riders, the infamous group of hooded vigilante tobacco farmers who pillaged and burned many homes and properties in the Christian County during this time. So there's a group of bandits. There's a group of bandits. And Dr. David Osmos's Night Riders, apparently, who are attacking tobacco farmers and others. So why a photography studio? Is it because Cayce comes from a tobacco farming family? No, no. It's because the presumed motive was revenge for Edgar allegedly having given readings to John T. Hanbury, a Christian County Circuit Court judge who had organized a campaign to infiltrate the Night Riders. The truth about the fire may never be known, but the details of the incident point to the Night Riders because they were pissed that Edgar Cayce did a reading. Once again, folks, he's under. He doesn't know what's being asked. Did a reading that the judge wanted all the details. Who's in this group? Who's in this vigilante group? Where can I find them all? When are they meeting up next? How can I bring them down? Unfortunately, Edgar was able to give that information unknowing because he is under a trance. And months later, 3 days before Christmas, because the information he gave was legit, real, and the judge did what he did with it, his business gets burned down. It gets even worse, folks. Gets even worse. Can you claim insurance? Yeah, there was insurance back then, everybody. He was able to claim insurance. So it helped with the property aspect of it. Except he had a whole lot of artwork from a New York gallery inside of his photography studio. From paintings to other photographers' All of that artwork from New York was on consignment. So because he hadn't purchased all of that artwork and then resold it, because he had it on consignment, insurance wouldn't cover that. He ended up owing them folks up in New York, in those days, $8,000. That today is probably 100 grand. So then his little business partner there that was very short-lived, he filed bankruptcy. Easy peasy, right? No, because if Edgar filed bankruptcy, he is married to Gertrude, who comes from the Hill. That bankruptcy would actually have tried to go after her parents' home. So they never even filed. That man owed so much money and now doesn't even have his own studio. So, okay, we're going to regroup. He starts working like a dog at the small studio on College Street, working as much as he can. That was like a little extra pocket studio that was off of another store. I think really where Edgar got a lot of his alone time. He starts trying to work like a dog. I'm going to hold the story here and let you know that Gertrude gave birth March 16th, 1907 to Hugh. There's a bunch of videos out there of Hugh. I had no idea that he was born in 1907. Wow. His firstborn, Edgar's firstborn child. And Edgar later in life, when he was doing a reading for a couple, um, or he had done readings for them, and they were expecting their first child, he wrote them a lovely letter, talking to them about how you can never actually understand what it means to be a parent, the depth and the love until that baby is born. He went on and on about the honor and the cherishing of a child. Beaten and battered. Committee is done. Loses his biggest market livelihood. He was so connected in the art world that he had New York artists, multiple from an art gallery in New York, in his studio in Bowling Green, Kentucky, up in flames. That's 3 days before Christmas. That following March, Gertrude has their first son. I'm going to leave us here because what we're about to go into is what would be on every parent's mind: money. And I also want to tell you there's more unfortunate events to come, but it's okay because Edgar was connected to the Akashic. Edgar was a sincere man. Edgar, Edgar needed to learn who he could trust, who he couldn't trust. Lots of ups and downs with a gift. Lots of understanding, boundaries, limits, trust, and praise goodness for Gertrude, because Gertrude always, always had Edgar's well-being in her mind. I have to say, if I'm giving praise to Gertrude, I gotta give praise to my husband. My husband, because, those in our lives can witness us. And when we witness someone else, we can see all these little things that they might not see. To how great they're doing, how much they've overcome, how much they've changed, and how smart and talented and great they are. But we can also witness they're tired, they're angry, they're stressed, they're lonely, they're whatever it may be. They're sick. And they might just keep going and keep going and keep going. And Edgar had that issue. Many of us have that issue, especially if you are a new father who just lost their main source of business and owes a ton of money. Gertrude would witness him, and she would always say, she would say it. Did Edgar follow it? I don't know. My husband tells me all the time, do I follow it? Probably not. Probably not. Until he really puts his foot down, I go, oh my goodness, you're right. I feel like crap. So, in the next bio episode, which might be next week, I'm not sure, because I really kind of want to finish out this whole series of events that lead into how do we use this gift? Because we're kind of in the middle of all the madness. Do know that with gifts like this, and I'm speaking to all the psychics out there, there's a lot of people of the Stars of the Morning Light Patreon community that have been really working on developing their gifts. And I know there's people here that watch these shows and think about if they have their own gifts. And this is called Edgar Cayce Life Skill Studies because we're bringing 100 years to the 100 years ago to the forefront. And so many people are becoming aware and enlightened to their own abilities. I want to very much iterate again. The one thing that kind of really took Edgar quite a while to understand and caused more harm than good is that he didn't know that if it's your gift, you're responsible for it. You also have the control over it. You have the power over it. You can determine when it's used, when it's not used, how it's used, how it's not used. You have the authority is what I'm trying to say. So many times, not just psychics, but most people, we give our authority and our will and our power over to outside influences because we might feel insufficient because we don't really know what's happening. You have the authority. It's the greatest thing anyone can learn, especially a gifted person. Because if not, ooh, it is time for me to go, folks. Because especially if not, you might start losing fingernails. You never know. So I love you all dearly. I'm happy I was able to be here to the best of my ability. Lucky and I will definitely be here 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here this Friday at Stars of the Morning Light. If you like this message, please hit the thumbs up for me. Consider subscribing. No pressure, but I'd like you to. For everybody else, it was really good to see you, and I'm slowly coming back, folks. So I'll see you later. Bye, everyone. Cheers.